Hey everybody, welcome to Church Comms 101. Today I want to help you set up a podcast for your church. Now, a lot of us have podcasts set up already that we're using for messages, but what if you want to have an interview podcast with some other type of content for marriages or parenting or something like that? I'm going to help you set that up and tell you what kind of equipment you need, how to get going, and how to make it really great. Let's talk about equipment you will need for this. First of all, you're going to need some good microphones. There's a lot of different types of mics you can use. In fact, I used a different mic for my podcast a long time before I got this one that was about $100 mic. It's like this mic right here. Then I had a windscreen. Pop that on there like that so it keeps from exploding. And then you put it in this nice little shock mount that came with it. And that keeps it from doing things like when you bump it. There you go. Simple little mic. You can get something like this for about $100 or less. And it does the trick. The next thing you need is something called an audio interface. Now what this thing does is it sits between your mic and your computer, and it changes this signal that you're sending through your mic into a digital file that your computer can understand and play back later. And after that, you can use any kind of DAW that you want. What's a DAW? Well, I'll explain it to you. DAW, Digital Audio Workstation. And this could be anything like Pro Tools, GarageBand. Even there's free ones you can download online called like Audacity, but the one I like to use is GarageBand. Now, if your audio interface has two microphones, then you ought to be able to set each microphone to record on a separate track in your DAW, in your audio workstation. I'm just going to call it GarageBand from here on out. But in GarageBand, you can change each track's input. So you go to track number 1 and select input, and then select the first microphone, and then go to track number 2, hit input, and select the second microphone. And then both of your speakers are going to be individually recorded on separate tracks, so that if one person's voice needs one type of EQ, then you can put it on that voice, and another voice can have a different EQ. This is really great if you're interviewing people over Skype. That way, at least your side of it's going to sound really great. And then you can EQ and tweak the Skype call, because they'll probably use earbuds or something like that as an interview. Okay, let's talk about how to produce your show. If you're going to have a great show, you need to understand your topic, your audience, and if there's any kind of demand for what you're going to be talking about anyway. This is why for churches I recommend picking something like parenting or pastoring your kids at home, or marriages, things like that, because there's always something you can talk about in those subjects. It's a good place to start. If you've got multiple people involved, you want to get together, you want to plan your show, you want to say, here's what we want to cover in this episode, here's what we'll cover in the next episode, here's what we cover in the third episode, etc., until you have them all planned, so you know what you're doing. This is what we do with our marriage podcast right now. It's going really, really well. It's called the Mindful Marriage Podcast. You can go check that out on iTunes and see how we do that. Once you get your notes down, you want to create some kind of talking point format for the show. But if you have a guest coming, you definitely want to at least write out what questions you're going to ask, and then send it to them a day or two ahead of time so they can have a chance to look at it, so they can provide some really good answers and not just shoot from the hip. One of the things I hope you've decided at the beginning is, well, how long should our episodes be? Now, a lot of people ask this question, so I'll just tell you, it depends on what you want to do. 45-minute to an hour-long podcasts work. There's several that I listen to. Carrie Nieuwhof's podcast is very long. I listen to some story-based podcasts like Heavyweight from Gimlet Media. Some of the serial podcasts are definitely longer. That can work if the content is compelling. But most people's average commute time is 20 minutes. So shooting for that 15 to 20 minute time is typically where most podcasters aim, because they know that in one trip from home to work, most people can consume one podcast. Once you've cut and edited your show down to the length you need, to the type of content you need, now it's time to export. An MP3 is what you're going to upload to be distributed out as your podcast. Now you're ready to start the distribution process. All right, I'm going to show you how to set up the distribution of your podcast in 3 different areas on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play Store. So it's very, very easy. If you use something like Podbean, mostly they're going to offer a one-click kind of option for you to distribute to all these places. They're also going to give you a feed URL that you can just take to these places. I'm going to show you how to do that and just drop the URL in that they give you. And in Podbean is where I'm at. It's the easiest one. I'm going to show you my URL, but I am going to show you how to click. It is simply this. You go right here to connect to Spotify, hit that button. It does it for you. All you have to do is sign in to Spotify, and it starts uploading your podcast. Whenever you hit publish from Podbean, your host, it just fires it off to Spotify as a podcast. So it's yours. It's still your property. It's still out there, but it's what gets you on Spotify. Now I'll show you the Google Play Store. If you will Google Play Podcast Portal, then you will find the walkthrough to set this up. You have to sign in. You notice my old email, seminaryofhardknocks@gmail.com, and that is where we set our podcast up. It distributes through that podcast, so it's kind of like iTunes. You need your iCloud account, so don't use somebody's personal Gmail on this. Get a official church one to do this, and you will just basically give the feed URL to Google, and they will distribute it. It's a walk, and they walk you through it. It's very easy. The other thing I would say is go to Google again or iTunes and Google Podcast Connect, iTunes Podcast Connect, and you will get the first link will take you to something called iTunes Connect, which is how you put content on iTunes. And you notice I have mine set up here. You also get these, some analytics and some resources. But basically, it walks you through signing in with iCloud. So again, use a church official iCloud, not your personal, and sign up for this connection. And then once you get approved, you will submit your feed, and that will get approved, and then they'll just start distributing. As soon as something gets put out from your host on your feed, everywhere that your feed is, like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, doesn't matter, all of them get the update, and they're all distributed at the same time by that company, and so you're good to go. And that's how you basically do distribution for your podcast. Pretty simple. I will say that Anchor is a great option. It's free and it's pretty unlimited. So for most churches that are small, that's something you want to look at. It's anchor.fm. I'll put those links all in the show notes. And if you have anything else that you want to add, talk to me about it in the comments. I'd love for you to add to this conversation, explain some things, because we might actually learn a whole bunch about podcasting, bro. Thanks for watching this show. I really appreciate it, you guys. Subscribe to this channel if you find it helpful and share with your friends. I'd love it. So thanks for watching ChurchCom 101.